I'm going to record the session, and he is Domenik, our electrician, and he will tell us about electrical issues at home for the next 5 weeks. You are Domenik. I'm going to put your presentation up, okay?
Maybe.
Right, the floor is yours, Domenik.
Hello, everyone. So as Mary mentioned, my name is Domenik. I've been an electrician for about 6 years. So I actually just came from a job, and I was doing a job, and I was using these very same tools. And the lady told me, she let me in. She's like, "Are you sure you're an electrician?" I'm like, "Yes, I am." She's like, "You're too young to be an electrician." And then I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. So I get that often. I get that they're like, "Oh, you're too young to be an electrician." But I started very young. Right after college, I got into a trade school, and I was fortunate enough to get some contracts and some big condominiums, and I had a big success, and I ended up opening my own company called Boost Electric. So that has enabled me to not only broaden my knowledge in terms of buildings and apartments and stuff like that, but also in electrical itself, it's enabled me to enhance my experiences. So now I'm gonna share some of those experiences at a basic level with you guys, so that your life is a little easier at home, and you don't have to worry about calling an electrician every time something basic happens. Yet I'm going to have a focus on safety aspects of things too, so that there are certain times that you must call an electrician, and you shouldn't be touching those stuff, and it's worth, calling somebody to come and look at those stuff. So if Mary doesn't mind, we can go slide by slide and cover some of those things. If you don't mind, go to the next slide, please. So I have submitted 3 videos, and we can play those 3 videos as we move forward. But I'd like to play those a little bit later. I just want to talk about some basic things based on the order that was given to me, and then we can watch the videos in order to aid more in terms of understanding of how the systems work. Particularly if there's a language barrier, the videos will help a little bit more. If you don't mind, go to the next slide, please. So we have, I talked about certain instructions that were given to me, and based on common sense as well. I'd like to begin with how electricity comes into the house, right? So how it comes from the first place. Then I want to talk about the panel itself. Once it comes in, it can't just go to every plug or switch. It has to go to a panel. And then I'm going to talk about some tools and some safety features. We don't really focus on tools because electrical tools are very specialty tools, but we will talk about some of the safety features regarding the tools as well. Next slide, please. So our first topic was incoming power. So there's 2 ways. There are 2 ways the power comes in. So in order to provide power to a house or an office, it either comes overhead, so with the wires that are dangling across the tree, or it comes underground. There really isn't a difference. Power is power, right? The only difference is that certain cities and certain regions have drawings and certain regulations that require you to go underground, and certain cities require you to go overhead. There is a different expense associated with upgrading, whether it's overhead or underground. Typically, overhead is more expensive because it requires an electrician to go up on a ladder and install all this stuff, rather than underground, you just fish the wires in pre-existing pipes. So there can be a price difference, but those are the only two ways that power comes in. There are no other methods. We haven't yet accomplished wireless transmission of power, so those are the 2 ways that we need to know. Mary, if you don't mind, go to the next slide. Is this a fast pace? Is this okay? I'm just being me, but I can slow down a bit or pick up the pace. Are you guys okay with this? Mary, you okay with this?
I'm okay, and I didn't see anyone from the chat box said that we're too fast, so you're good, Domenik. Thank you.
Amazing. So we talked about how power comes into the house, right? Now, and we also mentioned the fact that when power comes into the house, it can't just, go into the walls and go wherever it wants. There's a code, and there's a way those wires should be fished, and there's different sizes of wires for different utilities. But when the power comes in, it basically goes to the two A's. If you look at the two A's, the power goes into those. And if you see there's two wires, and then there's a different one, there's a white one. So there's three power that comes in. One is neutral, and the other two are basically each carrying half the load. This is why, even though it's a 120 panel, you can utilize both phases to have a 240 appliance, like a dryer or a stove that's operated with just electricity. But it's really a 120 panel, where just by the fact that we divide the power into two phases, we're able to tap into two phases again and get 240. But that's a little more complicated. You don't need to know that, but for the folks that want to understand that, they can have this information. And then we have the C. So the C is the actual breaker. That's the main. If you zoom in on that C, if you pay attention to that C, it says 100 on it. So that indicates the incoming load from the city. So that means your allowance is 100 amps. That's what you signed up for, and that's what was available. That's what you got. So when you turn that off, that's what turns off the whole 100 amps. And that's 100 amp was a good average for about 20, 25 years ago. But with the rise in electric vehicles and increased power consumption due to technologies, even though they're becoming efficient, we're using more of this stuff, which adds up in more electricity consumption. 100 amp is no longer the norm. Newer houses are built based on a 200 amp service in order to be able to facilitate all that load, whether it's 2 dryers and 3 fridge and 2 electric vehicles, right? So that's basically the anatomy, part 1 of anatomy of a panel. Now, if you go to the next slide, Mary, we will see individual breakers.
Right, Dominic, before
Yeah.
we stop, before
Sure.
we start the next slide, just
Sure.
for me, I'm a woman, so I'm not an electrical engineer. So I just want to be clear that some of our ladies come from overseas, coming here, immigrants, and arrive here. So other countries, they use 240 volt, and we are 120, isn't it right?
That's correct. So
can you explain a little bit the difference, and can I use the appliance that obviously can't from where I come from to here? Can you just clarify a little bit compared to like the 100 amps that you use is the current consumption and the voltage itself? Just a little bit of a clarification, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, that's correct. So in the United States and Canada, we're using typically 120 panels. In other countries, even your plugs and switches are 240. So that means that there's different appliances. That is very true. Now, some of those appliances you can use, but some of them you can't. Some of them actually on purpose you can't. They're been designed, but for some, as long as you get a branch that enables you to connect to our 3-prong connection, an adapter, it'll work. But some more complex machines like European coffee machines, we've had experiences where it doesn't want to work, and and we have to open the system and install a transformer and a little transformer inside for that to be able to work. Nonetheless, simple equipment you can get away with a simple adapter as long as it fits into our 3-prong system. Now, the 240 system is better, I guess. However, the 120 panel we have is safer. So if a kid goes and gets electrocuted, there's more chances of survival and less. Well,
Okay.
But then we run into the issue of electric vehicles. See, now the 120 panel is not going to cut it, right? Like the Europeans, the Europeans basically don't have level 1 charging. They have, they're already into faster charging because that's how their system is. So there's pros and cons that we have to bear in mind. Some people like this system versus the other, but in my opinion, there are pros and cons. And in terms of equipment, once again, just to touch base, basic equipment, you can get a simple adapter. More complex equipment, they've just made it like design obsolescence in order for it to work in that certain region, unless you hire an appliance professional to change a transformer that's built inside the equipment.
Yeah, just like Saroja said that asked about when can we change it. You just answered the questions. If easy one, simple one like a light or lamp, probably you can get away with just use an adapter. But big one like a coffee machine or television, then you can't do that.
Yeah, well, it depends on the television. Some televisions you can, but yeah, some other stuff. You can also before doing so, you can check with the manufacturer. So if you have stuff that you want to bring over Europe and it's not a basic equipment, like I had a gentleman order a very expensive $50,000 coffee machine from Europe, but they didn't check the power specification, and that manufacturer did provide one to work for the Canadian market with the 120, but they didn't read the specs properly or ordered the incorrect one, and they had to change some parts and go through some hassle to be able to get a new one. But with regards to basic stuff, you can always, if you have someone that's ordering it from there for you and you want to bring an equipment, it's always good to check with the manufacturer to see if a simple adapter would cut it. And sometimes with TVs, you can get away with it too.
Thank you for explaining. I'm going to move on the other slide. Thank you.
So there's different panels. So the big picture is a big commercial size panels for a big commercial office. I think there was a packaging company and they had multiple of those. And then the one in the middle is the regular size 100 amp service panel to a residential house. And then the one to the right is for a small little apartment complex. So when it comes to electrical panel size, doesn't matter. If you see more stuff, it's more complicated. It goes with different areas. If it's smaller, that means the square footage is smaller too. As a matter of fact, there's a direct link and code with regards to the size of the house and the size of the panel. So there's a square footage, based on a certain square footage, the panel has to be bigger, right? So you can't live in a 4,000 square feet house and have a 60 amp incoming line. You must pay for 200 amp service. So what you see is what you get with electrical. If you see a bigger panel, it means bigger stuff, more branches. You see a smaller panel, you see less circuits, less size, I guess. But that's it for that slide.
So Domenik, just
Sure.
one question. So, some of the time you open those panels, you got some blank spaces. Like so is it a capacity issues that make sure in the future you can add stuff in?
That's right. So those blank spaces, that means you can add stuff in. Technically you can add stuff in, right? But theoretically you might not be able to, right? The reason is because you can have 5 circuits taken out of the 20 available, but each of those circuits could suck out about 40 amps. There could be 5 electric vehicles on it charging at full capacity. So the empty space that you have, even though there is empty space, it doesn't mean that there will be power available.
Okay.
Right. So you have to utilize the spaces. So depends on what loads you have. It really depends. And the only way to do that is to have an electrician to look at the load and see what it is. But generally speaking, yes, you can fit in more circuit, a new breaker, and have more space for other stuff.
So there's a special code in the building, that specify square footage proportional to panel capacity.
To the panel capacity, and then there is another code based on panel capacity and how many items are connected to that, right? And so exactly, and that's based on amperage. So you got to look at if you look at your breakers and you have too many 40s and 30s and 60s, your panel's already full at 100 amp. But if you look at your panels and they're all 15s and you have 140 and 120 and then you have empty spots, chances are you have space, right? Because space, there are 2 factors. There's 2 factors involved here, and one is the physical space available and the amperage, the theoretical space, the electrical space available. So we have to factor in both of those matters in the equation. Yeah, that's basically it. It's not really complex. So just like you got to think about it as your energy level and your physical space that your body occupies. Yeah, size does matter, but if you're not able to utilize it, there's no point to it, right? So you can use the same analogy for that. So you got to be able to have both the electricity allowance and the physical space.
Well done. Thank you very much for answering the question. But Saruk have a very good question. She just stop there because I'm sure this is related to an electrical vehicle, because she said, how do you upgrade the panel to 200 amp?
Upgrade the panel to 200?
Yeah, well, if you look at the chat, she said, I want to know how you upgrade to 200 amp panel. Like might be because you're charging the electrical.
Yeah, sure. I can discuss that. So if you have a 100 amp incoming line, you have to first see what city you live in. We call the city as the electrician. The homeowner can do it too, but we typically do it if we do a job for a client. We call the city and we ask them whether there's space available, electrical space. See, the theory that I explained to you starts from a small little plug and goes all the way to the main electrical grid. That's how much this simple physics of the two rules that I told you applies. And it applies here too. Sometimes there's lines in the city, but they cannot supply you with an additional 100 amps because they simply don't have the electrical capacity in that region because of transformers they haven't upgraded. Now, most of the time, exactly. That's the thing. Now, most of the time, 90% of the time when I get clients requesting for, and I get a lot of those 100 amps to 200 amps.
One of the keys and what makes us so unique is client relationships. So many financial firms, how many times do we meet with clients and ask, when's the last time you heard from your...
Sorry, okay. Someone asking a question or just, forgot to mute?
Yeah,
sorry.
I think they just forgot to turn it off.
That's okay. Sorry, I'm just continue to share the screen. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to the sharing this. So right. Just bear with me. I'm just going to.
That's okay.
Share. Right. Okay. Did anyone see it? I don't think I can see the screen. I'm sorry about that, ladies. I'm just going back to Domenik. Domenik, you keep talking, then while I'm going to fix the technical issues.
Yeah, no problem. So you have to check in with the city, and then once that's a green light, and 95% of the time it's fine with them, they have enough power. And once they give us the green light, then we call, that was hydro, then we call the ESA, which is Electrical Safety Authority, and we schedule a booking with them. And we come and we change your lines and we give you a price and we do it based on that. Typically for a 100 amp to 200 amp service that without the city's cost. So sometimes the city says, okay, you can do this, but you got to pay us, $1,000 because we've got to upgrade the transformer. That happens in 10 to 15% of the cases. But generally for 100 amp to 200 amp service, including a new panel and extra breakers, because you can't use the same panel, has to be a bigger panel. It's about $2,500 to $3,500, so 2,500 to 3,500. But then that doubles your capacity, so that's okay. Something to bear in mind.
Okay. Right. I'm going to try this again, Domenik, and because somehow that might be because my capacity, the same thing. Yeah, I don't know why that I can't play it into a presentation mode, but a slideshow. But if it doesn't work, that's work now. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it.
So step one, we call the city. We get the confirmation. Step two, we come. We turn off your power for one whole day. It typically takes 2 electricians 1 whole day to do the job. And then step 3, the city comes back on, turns on the power. It's all done in 1 day, but the whole estimate and arrangement and everything is a 2-day job. But the whole process, inconvenience is a weekday. It has to be a weekday, 1 full day without electricity. And the cost, it really depends, but it's anywhere between 2,500 to 3,500 for a residential 200 amp service upgrade.
Thank you very much. Very informative, Dominic.
Yep. You're welcome.
Right, I'm going to change the next. Or should I? Is it okay now to change the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Let's do that. Yeah. So there's a couple basic things I want to talk about. You guys might have seen these buttons in some of your outlets near the kitchen or the washrooms. So these are called ground fault circuit interrupters, or GFCIs. You don't need to know that fancy name, but all basically it is that it near bodies of water, if it detects a lot of moisture in water, it automatically shuts off. It's a safety protection, so you don't get electrocuted, right? And it's, as a matter of fact, the code and the Canadian National Electrical Code states that anywhere within 1.5 meters of any body of water, you must install these. This is why when we have to install these electrical equipment outdoors, we have to give a higher price, because we have to include this GFCI system, whether into the plug or indoor in a panel. You can also do that, but you know, it basically is the code that you must follow. Some older buildings and stuff don't have it, but whenever they do an electrical upgrade, if they're a legitimate company, they should invest into upgrading those. The other thing that I want to mention today is these regular plugs, the regular receptacle. I have an older one here with me. It's an older version. However, if you pay attention inside these slots, they're hollow. Like, you can just poke them, right? I can just grab something and poke these. If you try to do that with the plug that says TR on it, you won't be able to poke it. You have to grab two prongs at the same time, mocking a plug for it to open up and go in. So that's very important for parents that have kids. Have you seen, some parents put those plastic covers into those plugs so that their kids, that's not necessary anymore with these, because kids could simply take those off after a while to become loose, but this is built into the plug inside of it, and they cannot poke it unless in the rare chance that they grab two metal objects and poke it. But we're talking in terms of probability, that's a rare, probability of event. At least it reduces the risk. However, that's a very important thing. So if you live in a household where you have kids running around, they're a little curious, they're gonna poke things, make sure you look out for that term TR. If not, make a suggestion to your landlord, or consider investing in upgrading those systems so that your kids are safer. In terms of plugs, I don't really know what else to talk about.
Yeah, Dominic, it's funny that you said about the distance. If you have 1.5 meter water away, where I come from is from England. They don't have plug in the bathroom.
Yeah, well, that's funny. Well,
yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's a historical safety issue with regards to that.
Yeah.
Because of Also, there could also be an issue with regards to just saving money and not putting a plug there. Because see, a simple light uses very little power, right?
Yeah, well, I think they have just for shaver, for point, for very small, but so you can't have a hair dryer in your bathroom and blow dry your hair in England.
Yeah,
you can't.
It uses a lot of power. Yeah, so maybe the fancier, the newer ones, where they charge more, they would put a plug, but the ones that were old, they wouldn't put a plug. But I'm sure there's a safety aspect, so especially in rental units.
Yeah, well, I just injected some little information, but here I'm just going to move the next. So that's next slide. Should I play your video now, and then
sure, yeah,
they can have a, and then we can have a, and then we can, ladies, we're going to play the Domenik very kindly in advance and done a lot of video for us. So I am going to play the video so that we can see what Domenik done for us. Okay, ladies, can you see, guys? Yep. And if you can hear, then tell me a thumbs up.
Hello, my name is Domenik Me from Boost Electric.
Yeah.
I've been an electrician for the past 8 years. I've been asked by your organization to do some lessons on basic electrical, and here I am explaining things to you about electrical. When I first got into electrical, I didn't know anything about the industry. I knew how to use a basic drill. I knew what a basic plier was. I know what a basic flat driver was. But other than that, I didn't really know how to use a meter. And these were the things that I learned over time. Today I'm going to share some of those lessons with you. To begin with, I want to point out something very basic. Since today's lessons are basics, I want to start with something basic, a plug. Now, this isn't a basic plug. I have some USB connectors there. That's just, because I'm an electrician, we got electrician's perks. So we utilize our tools in our own houses as well. Now, if you ignore those USB inputs, this just becomes a regular outlet that you just plug in any device to. Now, what you want to always look out for is this term TR. The term TR refers to temper resistance. You know those little plastic guards that you put into the plug so that your kids don't poke and the electrical socket and get electrocuted? Well, that's what the TR is. The TR does not allow you to poke into the plug any sharp objects. You must have two prongs, like a plug, going in simultaneously for the guard or the TR to open up. A lot of people don't know this, but when you go to Home Depot and you see a plug that's marked for $1.98 and you see another one for $3, this is the reason. You have to be very careful and pay attention to little details. This is what separates a lot of tradesmen than regular people. A tradesman would see little details that actually has been there by the industry, made by the industry for the professionals to recognize those little cues, not for the ordinary people. This is why you should hire an electrician for your electrical work and not a handyman, because there's these small little things that that they wouldn't. And in terms of safety, that's a major thing. And having yourself save $50 or $60 here and there, and having to deal with huge problems and even safety problems such as fire and other hazards, it really isn't worth it. So we want to start today by saying that you always want to listen to the qualified professionals, not the people that just have been doing it for a while or know how to do it, right? There's a difference. You can get things done, you can get things to work, but our job isn't, as an electrician, my job is to make sure they work as safe as possible, right? And obviously things such as aesthetics and functionality and those things are important too. But again, the most important part of my job is safety. So when we work, we want to make sure safety for the residents and also for the professionals or the electricians.
Right. While you're here, Dominic, when you're watching the first, how do you choose when you ask for an electrician, what should we check? When we ask the electrician to come, as you said, we need to find a professional, not anyone who just, they have done this before. So how do we know that they are qualified? What sort of things that we need to look out?
Well, it depends where you found them. So if you got them online, you simply refer to an electrical company. But when you get somebody online from us, it'll be usually very expensive. So you gotta really make sure that you inquire about their service call fee. That's very important, and you want to make sure you get that and recording or in writing that this is the service call fee, and they won't charge you more. Because a lot of times they'll come. Well, if they have to charge you more but they have to specify what it is, right? Very clearly, they can't just make up other unrelated stuff regarding it. And if it's through word of mouth and you heard of somebody, and then if they are actually electrician, they have an electrician's card, and sometimes, I forget that card with me too, even though they're required to have them. It's very simple to know who's an electrician and who's just a painter, and they just kind of so you gotta literally look at them. I mean, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, I had a lady tell me, just earlier, even though I own this company and I have like a few folks working for me that are much older than me. She's like, "Are you sure you're an electrician? You work as a?" I'm like, "Yes, I am," and I didn't mind, and I just answered her very nicely because she's doing a due diligence. Then about a minute passed. She saw my outfit, she saw my tools, she saw the way I was working. Then she let down her guards. And she's like, "Oh, okay, you are an electrician." I'm like, "Yes, I am," and so it's good to be like that. It's good to question them. Like even their cars, an electrician's van will look significantly different than another person's van. I drive a big Sprinter with a big yellow ladder on top of it. So that.
Is it a number, like they qualify, they often have a certificate? Are we need to look at what's qualification? I mean, like they a number, like trade number. Do we need to do that to make sure that we get a qualified?
Yeah, well, they have a card on them and they have a license number.
Okay.
Right? And it's okay for you to hire an apprentice for you to do their work, but they can give you their apprenticeship number, right? Okay. Because if they give you an apprenticeship number, that means they're working with a qualified master electrician. As long as it's a basic problem, they can resolve it as well. But they have a number that's associated with their ID, and you can simply look that number up by going to the ministry's website, or simply visually inspecting and see if it adds up and emailing the ministry to find out whether they are or not. But a lot of times, if the visual cues are there, a lot of times, like, look, if you went through it online and through a legitimate company, you don't need to worry about that because the liabilities on that, right? Because they're out there. Nonetheless, but if you're finding electrician that somebody told you they're an electrician, then it's always best to inquire. Like, oh, okay, well, I don't mind this person coming in, but would you mind asking them if there are actually, what their qualification is? And then they'll tell you, okay, I'm a third-year apprentice, or I'm a licensed electrician, or I'm a master electrician. There's 3 levels. There's levels, apprentice level, there's journeyman level, which is a regular license, and there's master. Master and journeyman are basically the same thing. It's just master has a little bit more experience and has their own company typically. But journeyman, I know a lot of journeymen that have more experience than master electricians, right? So it's and then apprentice level is divided into apprentice level 1, level 2, level 3. So you typically want to hire level 2 or level 3 if you want to save a little bit more money and not have to pay the $80-$90 rate for an electrician, pay $50-$60 for an apprentice. You might want to go with a level 2, level 3, not a level 1. Because at level 2 and level 3, you learn a lot, and a lot of those guys actually are just as knowledgeable as some journeymen, and they are qualified to work. The law dictates they have to be under the supervision of a master electrician, right? So as long as there's somebody directing them, not in terms of the actual work while it's getting done, but somebody sending them and they have somebody to refer to in case the problem gets complex or if they need assistance on it. So nonetheless, those are the aspects they have to remember. You don't have to worry if you got somebody online. You're just paying a little bit higher fee. You got word of mouth, which is typically paying less, but you risk hiring a handyman or painter as your electrician. That's something you keep in mind.
Yep, perfect. I'm going to play the other video, ladies. So look out.
All right. So now that we've established that my number 1 task is safety. Obviously, functionality comes with that, but if something works and then tomorrow you touch the switch and get electrocuted, well, I'm not doing my job properly. Now that we've established that, let's see how all this stuff works. One of my job descriptions for today is to ensure that I inform you folks of how power is delivered into a home. And we'll use a home as an example because with offices, it becomes a little more complicated. There's a different type of power they bring, a lot stronger power. It's usually a 600 volts, whereas in your house, you get 120 volts. And a lot of places in the world, people get 208 or 240 volts in their homes. But in North America, Canada, and America, we're sticking with 120, which is a little bit safer as well to work with. Now, you can imagine those big, thick wires that you see outside running along. They come from transformers. These little power stations that basically amp up the voltage, give it a boost and send the signal back to those lines. From those lines, the wire comes either underground or above ground and goes to your house. But before going inside your house, we need a way of managing that power. So right before the city brings the power to your house, they put it on a transformer. It's called a step-down transformer. They transform the power from high voltage to the appropriate voltage, which is 120 in this case for residentials. And from there, it goes to a panel box, an electrical panel. Now, those electrical panels are usually either fused or breakers. Fuses are older, and then breakers are basically fuses with a switch, with a button. So that if every time you blow the fuse by overusing the power on that circuit, instead of having to replace this, you can just turn on the button with the newer style. It just happened to have a fuse. This is what it looks like. Again, this is one-time use. Once you blow it, you have to replace it. You have to twist it in and twist it back out. So that's the city power comes directly into the panel. Exactly. This is why you shouldn't open that panel. And this is why when electricians open up your panel, there's usually a certain fee associated with it, because they have to be cautious of certain safety, and also if something hasn't been done and an electrician opens up your panel, they must repair it, right? So that's one of our codes that we must follow as electricians. Hence, once that power comes in, it's usually delivered from that little box into branches going to different things, such as a plug. This is a wire that's used. It's not the same wire that's coming from the city. This is a smaller wire used for smaller equipment. As an example, in your house, you usually have 15 amp circuits, but some circuits are 30 and 20 and 40. Your stove, for example, is 40. Your dryer, for example, is 30. Your regular plugs, lights, as you can imagine, is only 15, or the gauge that I'm holding in my hand. This is a 15 amp wire. If you were to open this up, this is how you strip it. It's called a wire stripper. Now, you do not require to have one of these. Stripping wires is not something you will be dealing with as a homeowner, but I'm just showing you a basic anatomy of the wires so that you can picture how things work and how we run our diagnostics. So again, from the panel, there's these two conductors and a ground wire that come and go into the plug, right? And it's buried inside the wall, and that's what makes your plug work, or your switch. Now, there's some cases where you're required more than two conductors, right? You have three. In case of your dryer, you have 3 wires. In case of your stove, you have 3 wires. But you don't really need to pay attention to those details. All that's important is that power comes in from the city, goes to a little transformer on the road or on the ground somewhere. Then from there, it comes to your house. In your house, it's in a small box that's managed. That's what an electrical panel does. It manages powers into different circuits. And then from its different circuits, it shoots it to different areas or different circuits. Part of that is safety. Part of that is just management of electricity. In case something pops or blows, it won't pop or blow the whole main line that's connected to the city. It'll pop and blow the line that's connected to the fuse or the breaker. So that's just the basics of how power is delivered to your house. Domenik with Priest Electric.
Thank you, Domenik. While I'm loading up the other one, I want to ask you, maybe I'm sure other ladies have the similar thing. So sometimes when your breaker, jump the breaker, like pop out because a circuit break. You know, sometimes you have a domestic appliance jump the switch, like my toaster. Is it okay just go back and just switch it back? You know, like flick it back on. Is it safe, is it something I need to investigate more before I go to do that?
Well, a little bit of both, but most of the time it's safe for you to go and turn it back on, but you have to unplug that device. Okay, look, you don't have to unplug devices that you don't use all the time. People say, "Oh, it uses electricity." Well, yeah, very little. It's irrelevant. Like it's very irrelevant to the amount it uses. So, but when that happens, unplug the device and go and turn on the circuit breaker or change a fuse. Simple as that. But the investigation happens after, because now you got to see why that happened. What setting was your toaster on? How many plugs are in that circuit? What other stuff are being used or turned off while that turned off? Now, if you have that circuit trip and have your fridge and your other stove not working, then
then that means that there's too many things on that circuit. And next time you should not use your toaster on that circuit. And that's, sometimes people that live in small apartments are like, what? I can't use a plug. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. That the stuff that they built, they got too advanced too fast, and they consumed a lot of power before the building codes could keep up. So yes, a lot of the newer buildings have 3 separate circuits and just in the kitchen. But you won't have that in older apartment buildings. You'll have one circuit running through the entire thing, and one circuit or 2 circuits. And if you have that, one microwave is 1,500 watt of power at its max use. That means one microwave, if you use it as max, is enough to trip the circuit. I mean, you don't use it as max, of course. It usually uses about 1,000 watt of it. Another 200 watt of it is for lighting. Another 200 watt for another small plug you have. But at the moment you start connecting your toaster, which also maxes out at 1,500 watts, and because it's a heating device, it'll get there faster than microwave, which uses electrons to boil up the inside, right? Because of those heating elements are very inefficient, it can also jump a lot. So a toaster would do it, or a hairdryer. Hairdryer does the same thing. That motor is very inconsistent. It blows hotter and then it surges. That is enough to trip the circuit. Similar to the washrooms. You have a gentleman upstairs blow drying his hair and a lady downstairs blow drying their hair, and those 2 washrooms happen to be in the same circuit. A lot of people are like, how? Well, because when they run the wire, they run one, and they run it all the way up to the same line of the washrooms because they happen to be in the same line, right? And when they do that, it's easier for them to build it, right? Cheaper for them to build it. But then they run into this issue because you have somebody using 1,500 watt electricity here, another person producing 1,500 watt, it trips, right?
Yeah.
So the way to remedy that is to run a new circuit to the newest washroom, to the nearest washroom, to the panel, and then keep the other circuits unused. That's the only way to remedy that. And people wonder, like, no, how's this going to work? That's the only way because that's how they built it. They also save another aspect on that. Remember how every plug had to be near water, had to be GFCI? Now those GFCIs are more expensive, right? They don't want to have to put 12 different GFCIs across each house they build. What they do is that there's a code that allows you to put additional 10 plugs onto one GFCI. So what they do is that they run a circuit to the washroom, put on a GFCI, and they put the rest of the load on that for the kitchen, for the washroom, everywhere else, so that they don't have to put extra things. And unfortunately, the code allows them to do that, but it's also because the code that these equipment, like, nobody used 4 hair dryers at the same time in a house before. I don't care how big your house was, but these things became more and more popular with fashion and with the social media and everything, and we started using more power consuming computers, more power consuming equipment. Only lighting got more efficient, really. Nothing else got more efficient. So that resulted in the code. Not a lot of newer places that are being built don't have that issue because they have separate circuits for every washroom, separate multiple circuits for a kitchen and multiple circuits for the living area. So I see a lot of apartment complexes having 100 amp service dedicated to that, and that's a lot of houses now. So that's a new code. So they're accounting for this in the future, but that's something you want to consider when you're paying rent, right? You have a lot of people in the house and the rent's a little cheaper. Investigate, go in there. Don't just look at the walls and the conditions and the view. Look at the electric. Like, okay, how many plugs do I have? What is the service? Am I gonna have an issue where my kids are always gonna fight over who's gonna use the hairdryer or who blew the fuse in the kitchen again? So that's something you want to factor in when you're comparing a place that's lower in rent versus higher in rent. So
interesting. Yeah. And just as you say, I mean, there's a lot of questions we're going to answer later. But Domenik, but I don't think no wonder that high consumption equipment like the fridge and the cooker and everything on a separate circuit, like different, because they're so high power. If you put another stuff in and use your hairdryer on the same socket, you can trip it so quickly.
Yeah, very quickly you can do it. Now, sometimes it doesn't. They're like, oh, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Well, that's true. Theoretically, that can be the case. Sometimes, but also most of the case, more than 50% of the time, it should trip, right? Because those ratings are based on maximum power consumption, right? So sometimes you're using just below it to get away with it, and then that other time it goes. And it's not good for you to keep on tripping your circuit either, because it's not like it's unsafe, but imagine you keep tripping your circuit. You're gonna have to change it. If the lifespan of the circuit breaker is 8 years, now you're gonna have to change it after 3 years or 4 years. Because after a while you're gonna see what happens with these circuits that trips.
After like 2 years, they're like, you know, it trips once a week. I'll just go turn it back on, right? And then after 2 years, it stops working completely, right? And then when we go to a job site, we almost always know the case. We pull up our meter, we open the panel, we check the voltage. There's nothing reading. The breaker is dead, right? So it's been tripped and stirred so many times that the internals have been busted.
Okay.
So they need to put a new one. So we.
How often you need to
make sure-
change that? How often do you need to change, like,
you know, you should be good. You should, you know, some houses have breakers that are 25 years old and they're still running well, right? But
Okay.
I've noticed with the new breakers, new norm, every 10 years or so, they need to be
Okay.
replaced. But you don't need to change them until your, you know, your circuits randomly stops working, right? Because the number one thing that if things randomly, if it's truly random when it stops working, it's from the breaker. But if it's not random, and if you've done one or two things, then we need to know about it. And this is very important because when I go and try to ask people questions, they think I don't know my job. That's why I'm asking a lot of questions, but it's the exact opposite of it. I need to investigate exactly what you did because I know depending on what you did, I already know what the solution is. I don't have to go and look for it, right? So I can go look for it in that specific spot. So this is very important for you guys to give very clear information to the tradesman. So if you burst a pipe and you know that your son put a nail somewhere, tell them about it because it's gonna, you're there to solve that issue, at the end of the day. So they're gonna solve it. Or if, as an electrician, a lot of times people don't tell me, and they're like, "Oh, it just stopped working," and I'm like, "Okay." And I figured out what the problem is. I'm like, "It's not possible that it just stopped working. Like, can you explain to me further?" And they're like, "Oh no, I just plugged it in and out." I'm like, "You plugged it in and out," and I open up the plug and I see that because of over time the plug became loose, the screws, and they were going in and out. The wires also became loose and got disconnected. So a lot of times it helps to explain to the tradesman what the exact issue is, and at the same time ensure that they have your best interest in mind too. Yeah, that's it about that.
Yeah, it seems to be like you help you to save you investigate longer, give you all the information so you can be fastly
Correctly.
do the problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Even timing matters.
Yeah, I'm going to play this video, two ladies, the last one, and then once Dominic done, then
As a part of this segment's
Question.
last lesson, which is just basic introduction to electrical, I'd like to mention one last thing is that let's say you have something plugged like a hairdryer, right? Hairdryer is by itself enough to blow a circuit if it's used for too long at its highest setting. Now, that might sound ridiculous to some folks, saying that, oh, why wouldn't things work at my own house? I have it plugged in, we live in an ancient time. Well, the truth is that the technology and the equipment that these guys made were, too far advanced for the electrical residence code to catch up with the demand. And that's what happened. A lot of condos that aren't brand new, or houses that aren't brand new, you use two hair dryers at once, you're gonna blow the circuit. You're gonna use a microwave, you're gonna blow the circuit. There's just nothing they can do. You want more power? Go to a bigger house. That's really the simple thing. And I know it sounds harsh, but that's just how it is. You have to make sure you know what the circuit is, and that the circuit is limited to a certain amount of power. And these new fancy hair dryers use a whole lot of power. Now, of course, there's a way around that. You can run a new line to your panel, but of course you'd have to hire an electrician for that, and you'd have to consider the damage that you would cause running a wire from point A to point B, right? So there's those things you could do. But the best to do is to buy a hair dryer that has a lower power consumption. It's probably better for your hair anyway. But really, that's the best advice I can give you. For the folks, sometimes when I go to people's homes and I try to explain to them, they think that it's not true and I don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, no, that is a problem. Microwaves and hair dryers got way too advanced, way too fast, way too quick, and our electrical grid wasn't keeping up with the amount of power they required to run all their components. So let's give you an example of one of you guys connecting a hair dryer into this, and then you see a spark. You see a spark and you freak out, and it keeps sparking. Well, the best thing is to do, if you're right there and it keeps on sparking, you can just hold the extension wire by its plastic part and just pull it out. Nothing will happen. It's sparking because there isn't a connection inside the thing, and it's trying to pull power, but there's too much power or too little power, and it keeps on sparking. But when you disconnect the load, all of that will stop. Then you want to walk up to the electrical panel that we discussed, and you want to figure out which switch controls that little plug. By code, by law, every panel must have the information on it listed once it's installed. So that information should be there. But oftentimes there isn't, and that's why you need an electrician to come have a look at that circuit, find the circuit, and investigate, do a diagnostics. I do this all the time. I get called in for diagnostics. This ensures safety and also ensures that doesn't happen again. So again, if something starts sparking, don't panic. Your main objective, if you're close to the panel box and you know which breaker it is, turn it off or untwist it. Or if you're by the device, just disconnect the device, because if you let the spark to continue, then you can cause fire. That was just a last safety tip I wanted to share with you folks. I will see you guys next week for the next lesson.
Well, thank you very much, Domenik. And as I said, that we're going to open to the floor. I'm going to stop the recording so that we can do a Q&A question, just in case people don't want to be me showing online. But thank you very much. Appreciate that. So much information.
My pleasure.
Domenik.
Thank you for helping me out too. Appreciate that.